Hello there everyone, it's me Harry, and for day 12 of the Mediavent calendar we're going to be doing part 2 of this Hasbro extension video, and this time we're taking a look at the games that were actually based on Hasbro IP, and some related ones too, because why not? So, this video is only including titles that are based on Hasbro IP itself, so I will not be including licensed properties that Hasbro Interactive have published, because I do not count those as such. But without further ado, let's get started. So we're starting off with the original PC release of Monopoly. I won't be showing the big boxes in these, even though I do have all these dual case games in their boxes, but still. So this is the original CD-ROM release of Monopoly from 1995. Developed by Westwood Studios and published by Hasbro Interactive. My copy is a 1997 release. It's identical to other releases of the game, but it's cool regardless. Next up is Cluedo CD-ROM. So this is a port of the Cluedo game for the Philips CDI, but it only includes 3 of the missions, each one being on its own disc rather than 6. So here's the back. This was released in 1996. And then inside it's formatted like a book, so the manual is already in there. And then each of the discs are in sleeves. And as I said, there's 3 discs altogether. I don't know who developed this, but of course it's another Hasbro Interactive published title. Here comes the original version of Risk, also from 1996. Also comes in a box sleeve. There's 2 discs in it. There's disc B and disc A. One's to install the game, one's to play it. Seems like NMS Software is the developer of this game, from the look of things. Here we have Mastermind. So this is a board game or something that Hasbro doesn't own, but they do distribute, and as such they published this CD-ROM version of the game as well. It's got a barcode on the back of it, interestingly enough. Even though this was not meant to be sold physically, it always came in a box. Just seeing who the developer of this game is. It doesn't explicitly say who developed it. It just says that the Invicta Toys and Games Limited owns the trademark to Mastermind. Nothing to do with the game show. It's, once again, a board game, nothing to do with the BBC show. Boggle CD-ROM. So basically it's Boggle on your computer. And that's pretty much it. Nothing much else to say about this one. This came out in 1997. So here we are. And now, the only Hasbro Interactive title for the PS1 that I own at the moment, based on a Hasbro IP, Beast Wars Transformers, developed by Sony Computer Entertainment Europe and published by Hasbro Interactive as well, and released in the UK in 1998. It was one of Hasbro's first PlayStation titles, the other one being Frogger and Monopoly, and then Risk came out a little while later. So here we are. And obviously this is based on the Beast Wars TV series. So here's the manual. Here's the disc. And then here's the back of the manual with the different Autobots and Decepticon type characters in the show. So, yeah. Here we are. Now here is Monopoly 2. So this is the sequel to the previous version of Monopoly that was done by Hasbro Interactive. Except this one was developed by Artex Studios and is in 3D. It says Monopoly New Edition on the front, but I call it Monopoly 2, just for simplicity's sake. Create your own board or choose one of 12 city variants. So it's like a really customizable version of Monopoly in some way. Pretty cool, actually. Tonka Construction 2. Developed by Imagine Engine and also released in 1999. So this is the sequel to the original Tonka Construction, which I do not own. The manual's hidden in the cardboard sleeve. So this comes in a sleeve instead of a jewel case, interestingly enough. And I think that's most likely to do with it being a kid's game. Nerf Arena Blast, or just Nerf Arena as it's called in the UK. Developed by Visionary Media and published by Hasbro Interactive as well. It was released under the Atari banner because it was an arcade-based first-person shooter with Nerf weapons. It's essentially an Unreal Tournament game, but without all the blood and gore in it, as it runs on Unreal Engine 1. So, pretty cool, actually. And this was released in 2000 in the UK. Oh, haven't forgotten to show the disc as well. A nice bright orange disc. Nice. Tonka Space Station. This was the last of the Tonka games that was released under Hasbro Interactive. And this was developed by... I can't read the... Image Builder and Data Design Interactive. So, yep. DDI is behind this game. The masters of shovelware themselves. But you've already seen that in my previous video where I criticised DDI's titles. So now with that all taken care of, let's take a look at all the games in the keep cases. So after Hasbro Interactive was bought out by Infogrames, they obtained the rights to release their previous titles, as well as gaining an exclusive licensing deal with Hasbro to release their games. So Infogrames was Hasbro's video game partner. So we'll start off with the re-releases first. So here is the re-release of Battleship 2, originally released in 2000, and this version was released in 2001. It's the same game as the original release, but it doesn't include a manual, it just has a PDF file on the disc. And, well, Hasbro Interactive and Atari branded titles don't count for this. Microprose branded titles that were re-released had their DRM removed from it. So that way, because Safe Disc prevented that from happening. And that way you could play the games without any issue at all. But I'll tell you that later on. So here's Monopoly Junior, another re-release. The game was originally released in 1999. So it's basically like a kiddie version of Monopoly. So this was developed by Mind's Eye Productions, who did a bunch of other games for Hasbro Interactive. And I forgot, with Battleship 2, that's developed by Maya Glass Interactive. The same company who did the Missile Command remake. Hasbro. Here's the disc. Very similar format to Battleship 2. Totally Action Man, also from 2001, re-releases Action Man Jungle Storm and Action Man Raid on Island X. But the interesting thing about my copy is that it's actually misprinted. So this is the Jungle Storm disc, but it actually has Raid on Island X on it. And Raid on Island X actually has Jungle Storm on it. I find that incredibly weird. I don't know how they managed to mess that up. Another thing to note is that I don't know if that's true or not, but Jungle Storm's cover actually has Alex Mann on it, rather than the standard generic Action Man seen on the Raid on Island X cover. Because it just looks very, very similar to the Alex Mann version of Action Man that's advertised on the VHS cover. So this was the original Fox Kids 20th Century Fox VHS releases of the game. And then it was released later on by Buena Vista. Oh, and I think that's Dr. X. So yeah, pretty strange actually. And then here's Family Collection, which is a re-release of Cluedo, Murder in Blackwell Grange, Risk 2, and Monopoly Westwood Studios. So Risk 2's from Deep Red Games. Cluedo is from Engineering Imagination. So this uses a later version of Monopoly on this disc. There's Risk 2, and that removes the DRM from it. And there's Cluedo. I've not been able to get Cluedo to work, but the other two games work just fine. Aside from the installers, which I had to modify. And then the last of the re-releases is Totally Tonka, which includes Tonka Space Station, Tonka Raceway, and Tonka Search and Rescue. And this also came out in 2001. Raceway and Search and Rescue were both developed by Media Station, and Space Station, as I said, was developed by DDI and Image Builder. My copy doesn't have Tonka Search and Rescue. It only has Tonka Raceway and Space Station. But the content on them is identical aside from their manuals being in PDF form on the disc. Now we're on to the original titles. Action Man Destruction X. This was developed by Blitz Games and published by Infogrames. This is a port of Action Man Mission Extreme on the PS1. Although there was another title that used the same name also on the PS1 that was developed by the 3DO company. Published by the 3DO company. Although I don't know for sure if it's a port of that game or of Mission Extreme. They were both by Blitz Games. Here's the disc, and there's the manual. There we are. It's got generic Action Man on the front cover. Monopoly Tycoon from Deep Red Games and published by Infogrames. From the people who brought you Roller Coaster Tycoon, it says, which is kind of misleading because it's technically referring to the publisher Infogrames. This game doesn't have anything to do with Roller Coaster Tycoon. Not even the same developer. But it is a construction, like a management simulation game with the Monopoly brand on it. Here's the disc. I've not played it because the game's very hard to run on modern Windows. Tonka Monster Trucks, released in 2002, developed by Data Design Interactive. Once again, published by Infogrames. And this game, well, it runs very badly. It's very prone to crashing. But I shouldn't have really been expecting it because it is a Data Design Interactive game after all. But I would say it plays better than their shovelware games any day. At least it tries to be a good game. Tonka Search and Rescue 2, the sequel to the original Tonka Search and Rescue. Developed by Artex Studios and published by Infogrames. As I said, released in 2002. Here's the disc and the manual. Monopoly New Edition, or Monopoly 3. So this is a remake of sorts of Monopoly New Edition, or Monopoly 2. It's from the same developer, Artex Studios, but the only difference between Monopoly 2 and Monopoly 3 is that Monopoly 3 doesn't have the custom board maker, and it has a different intro sequence and a different logo sequence, because of it being published by Infogrames. Here we are. Now we're on to the console games. So here we are with Micro Machines, based on the classic IP of the same name. The the games in the Nightcrow Machines franchise were normally done by Codemasters, but Infogrames Sheffield House developed this game, released for the PS2 and Xbox in November of 2002 and a GameCube version which I don't have, following in January of 2003. So here's the back. So the Xbox and GameCube versions and the Game Boy Advance version never came out in North America. The PS2 version did, but it was sold for a limited time. And interestingly enough, while the packaging has Atari's logo on it, the disc just has the Infogrames logo on it. Kind of strange, but there you go. But on the Xbox version, it does have the Atari logo on it. So this is still one of the few Atari branded titles done before Infogrames rebranded as Atari. Next up is Monopoly Party. So this is a variant on the classic Monopoly, featuring a game mode where everyone plays at the same time rather than taking their turns. But it's still the same classic rules where the first player goes bankrupt and makes sure one person wins and bankrupts the others. A classic, released in 2002, PS2 and Xbox version, or 2003, GameCube version. It's certainly a lot of fun. So it's developed by Runecraft. And that's, Runecraft, and not Minecraft. Runecraft went into bankruptcy shortly after this game came out. And eventually they became Games Lab under the BBC. But I'll talk about that in another video. Yeah, GameCube version has a nice bright red disc, whilst the PS2 version just has a blue disc. This version is a re-release, even though the rest of the packaging just has the Infogrames logo on it. And even in-game it still appears. And then, since they'd rebranded as Atari, here we are. Beyblade V4 Super Tournament Battle. If I could really call this a Hasbro game, it doesn't have their branding on it, but Hasbro does own the Beyblade IP, or distribute the Beyblade toys outside of Japan, so you could really count it as such. It was published by Atari and developed by a company called AI, and released in November of 2003. And there's also a PS1 version of the game, but I don't know where I put that. Sorry. Here is Tonka Town. So, yeah, they were still making children's games even after they became Atari. Developed by Imagine Engine. And published, by Atari in 2003. Or 2004 in the UK. Featuring, what's his name? Yeah, Chuck the Dump Truck. Don't know why I forgot his name. There you go, the early version of Chuck before the Adventure of Chuck and Friends came to be. And then the last of the Tonka games from the original lineup was Tonka Firefighter, developed by Boston Animation. I don't know why I said it wrong. And this is the classic game with Tonka Joe in it. And it's simply, well, you get what I mean. It's basically you're sorting out the fires. And as usual, that's pretty cool. My Little Pony Best Friends Ball. So this is a game based on the G3 My Little Pony. It was developed, it's another game from Imagine Engine. And the US version came with a baby pony. An actual, toy that was included in the game. So, I don't know who that pony is, but that's Rainbow Dash. I can only tell because it looks like Rainbow Dash. And the manual in my copy isn't in very good nick. So, there we are. We have Transformers, developed by Atari Melbourne House and published by, obviously, Atari for the PS2 in May of 2004. So this is a game based on Transformers Armada. Very difficult, I'd say, but it is a very good shooter. So if you like Transformers Armada, you'll love this game. And there's also a director's cut version, which came with an extra DVD, but I don't own that one. Risk Global Domination. So this is essentially a real-time strategy game based on the Risk IP. Here we are. Developed by Cyberlaw Studios. Published by Atari, released in July of 2004 in the UK. There we are. Trivial Pursuit Unhinged. So, technically, this is not a Hasbro licensed game, as at the time Trivial Pursuit was owned by Horn Abbott International. Hasbro didn't acquire the IP until 2008, but I'll still count it in anyway, because Trivial Pursuit is very, commonly associated with Hasbro. So, yeah, I'll count it as such. It's developed by Artex Studios and was released in 2004 in the UK. And earlier on in the year in North America. There was also an Xbox version released as well, but that wasn't released in the UK. And the CD-ROM, not CD-ROM, the PC version came on 2 discs. We've got 2 more games to go now. Here is Axis and Allies, a real-time strategy game based on the board game. Developed by Timegate Studios. And this came out in December of 2004. It was one of the last games under Hasbro's exclusive contract with Atari before Atari sold it back due to financial issues. Here's the cardboard filler. Here's the manual with a BT advert on it. And then it comes with 2 discs, one to install the game and one to play it. Here we are. And last but not least is the infamous Jenga World Tour for the Wii. One of the worst games for the system and one of the biggest examples of shovelware for the system. Why would you convert a game like Jenga onto the Wii? It's very hard to control and knock down the tower and whatnot. So this was developed by Atomic Planet Entertainment, a very infamous shovelware developer, normally doing PS2 games, and was published by Atari. It was licensed by the company that owns Jenga, which is Poco Nobe Associates. And as such, they're credited on the bottom. So this was released right after Hasbro's contract with Atari had finished, so this game doesn't technically count as part of it. So here's the manual on the disc, and do not buy this game. So that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I wonder what I'll be doing next for day 13. Well, you'll just have to see. See you later, everyone. Bye for now.